and 100 of that is 5%. Now, there's always a little bit that we need to cover, like refrigerants, et cetera. They're fairly small in their contribution. So this was well in the common scope of the sectors that we need to cover. The thing to notice also that is they bounce around, right? Electricity 1 year was 21,000 metric tons of CO2e, that's equivalent when we convert it to carbon dioxide, and it shoots down to 17,000, 664. Same thing, natural gas shoots out, and some level of seasonality, but I will also say that in any inventory, it's the estimation method, and that as you get doing these year after year, you'll actually perfect your data sources and remove some of that uncertainty. But generally, the break news is, your question. Whenever, okay, I didn't maybe have the second right, so we can make sure to capture that. You want to ask it now? You want to? Okay, let me finish this slide real quick. So the good news is that total emissions in 2021 were 133,007, and they did in fact go down to 131,003. That's the right direction. That's a small change, but again, we have to start somewhere. So that was a great change in trend. In particular, we talk about what is someone's carbon footprint. What is it when we take the total and we divide by every per child in that jurisdiction, and we have to per capita. And so you'll see that fell from 10.86 to 10.54. So this can be accomplished many ways. Sometimes your population going up doesn't really result in a lot more emissions. Sometimes that. So we like to normalize not just the whole number, but the per capita. So yes, you have a question?
Yeah, my first question, thank you, is for your guys' planning and to what years are being required to national inventory, or is it just 1.5 or
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just from a scientific perspective, I think it'd be very interesting to see what 2020 was as far as transportation, if the total MTCO was setting, but just redistributed because we want to or actually down completely out of curiosity. But
yeah, I mean, I would say I've done this my kind of work for 18 years and really seeing something major like the pandemic just shift from people were driving, but guess what? They were home, everyone had the heater on, the air conditioning on, and the offices, the great part were on autopilot. They were also on. So we actually see really interesting, you kind of sit down some ground about that when you look at a particular community during those years. And it's starting to kind of get back to, whatever the new normal is. But yeah, we're in line with the guidance, and so there was no reason to think they would kind of sway either way. Cold winter could sway it one way, or hot summer can sway it another. So it's those sorts of things that we just try to capture. So again, the whole numbers are interesting. I think the percentage is the more important takeaway because what you don't measure, you can't really measure. Kind of the same greenhouse gas emissions. And so wow, transportation is somewhere between 40% of your total inventory. And realize this is for all the people in the city. These aren't city operations, they're very small compared to this. So we're not talking about fleet vehicles or the things that us directly control. And so really everything we're going to talk about is how do we modify behavior of the folks who work, live, and play here, because we can't manage it. So how can we encourage or break down barriers to get people to think about lowering their greenhouse gas? Electricity, for example, that's on its kind of on the grid, and it's all not grid, so it's own trajectory. The grid is creating, right? And those are steps that are being taken at a far larger scale than any city or county. And so thinking about the state on electricity, it's all money, triple bottom line. But electricity really is going to be a big focus here. Natural gas is interesting, just because there's inroads into what's called renewable natural gas, especially when we've got dairy farms and stuff, there's some capture and needs. But there's also, again, within the industry writ large, a push to go away from natural gas. But they're more reliable, cheaper to run, so it's hard to that tension. So, like I said, we're really here today to really focus on this. Any more questions? I really don't want to trade. And so here are the GHG emission reduction targets. Again, the state has a goal of, carbon neutrality, GHG reductions, to 2050. And so by sector, they want to, remove or offset. Remember, this is a net. If you sequester more carbon, plant more trees, etc., capture it and use it in other ways, it's still a net. So it's the net zero by sector. And so electricity, we said, was the third highest for your city. And so we've got 15% by 2030, 60% by 2040, and 100% 50. Largely in local districts, right? More renewables. Never thought I'd be doing solar projects in Washington, honestly, today. It's been great to see other renewables besides just hydro. I'm going to jump down to heating, which was the highest. You can see we got a much slower growth by only 5% by 2030, 10% by 2040, and quite frankly, a big jump in the last decade. And honestly, when you see reduction targets like this, it's because we're counting on massive retrofits and new technology that maybe does not exist in the marketplace today. So it's a little bit about negative care, because you've got housing stock that has infrastructure that relies on natural gas. So there's industry, et cetera. So you can see why this is not just a straight to the other. So back to transportation, again, which is roughly 38% of your inventory. Looking at almost 10% by 2030, which is around the corner, 60% by 2040, which looks good job that same trajectory they hit 100% by 2050. This involves not just reducing trips, but also assisting the conversion to non-fossil fuels. So there's really two on the way. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as we're looking at technology improving and stuff like that, when you talk about transportation, you're talking about miles reduced, right, by travel, but you're also talking about converting to electricity. So in your findings here, or in your data, what's the correlation between converting over to all electric and what that does to the electricity emissions ranking based on what we're trying to do here within this comp plan that we're required to do?
Great question. Great question. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody will have some, like a car where you drive, you would see this compared to point shooting over, right? So that's simply again where what can the city do to encourage that kind of changeover, right? Because once you convert from fossil fuels to say electricity, although it's cleaner per mile today, it's still not zero to your point. I really know to your point. But again, the power company is monitoring, the state is working with that to change the mix of their resources. Discontinue coal to rely more on technologies and rely more heavily on renewable. But let's face it, that's also going to take a investment in infrastructure and battery storage, for example, because the sun doesn't always shine, and it doesn't shine when everybody comes to work and school and wants power at that point. That's not the time in general. So solar, for example, is not a perfect solution. So I think that's why a conscious rollover is important, because if everybody did it today, they would have to buy power from the market, you know, from the Mountain States of the burning coal, and we could actually see a reversal. That might be what you're hinting at. So this is where a conscious approach to the next 25 years, I think is the prudent thing, because you know, the problem isn't sitting on a whole bunch of kilowatt hours of the, you know, aren't selling, they almost like just game. So yeah, the market was suddenly there. It actually, you know, started with it to produce that and continue that downward trajectory, you know, measure tons of CO2 per, you know, megawatt hour. So great question. And I'd say it's just pausing a little bit. The technologies are not for heavy duty at all. And medium duty on all electric is emergent, I will say. Frankly, Europe looked ahead, those who signed up to the Paris Accord. So Volvo has some, you know, models that have the sort of range that a medium duty truck. But when you're talking interstate commerce, there is nothing that's going to be diesel for its power today. Misquote that I've heard these all the time, right now, nothing beats it on range, availability, and power, you know. And so there are some technological not that there are other states who are also, you know, really pushing this sort of conversion. And so technology, you know, a little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick, you know, the industry will keep, you know, will keep pace. Like I said, Europe is really leading the way on this. And, you know, just with the Volvo example, they make them, but they don't even sell them in this country right now. We don't have the infrastructure to maintain them, you know, so they're available, and there's some pilot programs that are being used, that initially are being used, EPA is paid for a couple of some of the big port hubs on the West Coast. But I think we're probably good 10 to 15 years away from the sort of affordability, you know, probably we have some stuff. And that's a lot of just my knowledge of the market, but so yeah, it changes that happens slowly. So these are goals, they're targets, they're not absolutes. It's not so much penalty there to make them. Congress wants to see reasonable progress. And so, you know, we're going to dive in a little bit about what does the city actually influence. You know, the city owns and operates at least very little of the sources that contributed to this, you know, citywide inventory. And so there's always, when I start on this project, and I what can we do, you know, so we'll talk about what's possible, some modest, you know, encouraging, then we get to, you know, where it's a little more next time, you know, when there's actually a little more pinch. But that element tension just exists in every community, you know, you are not alone in this, as we've been rolling this out, we get lots of questions about, well, we don't want to be less competitive, or, you know, that sort of thing. So that's, you know, the state has this idea, we're all gonna get there together, but you can kind of get there at your own pace, but they do want to see. Any other questions with this slide? Great. So what does that mean for Sedro-Woolley? So I like to put it always in perspective, sort of compare to other, you know, inventories that we have. And so if you look at the total annual emissions, 1990 for the state is what we did what we call next to that. The state wasn't you know, measured tons in 1990, but that is a sort of a standard marker about, because if you look at what happened in the atmosphere, and then it really started counting this, you know, rapid increase to 3 degrees, right? You know, so a lot of states use that as a bad cast. That's why we don't have it at the county and state level. Don't worry about that. It's that they're just kind of, you know, mostly for information. So between 19 and 21, the state increased its total GHG emissions. That's not surprising at all. There's, you know, the economy was booming, people were moving, you know, things were happening. And you can see again that first one. Oh, wait, it was, sorry. I think it was orange in there. Make sure I'm right side. And so the idea is by 2030 to be at 51.4 million metric tons, so there, the other slide, this is a million metric tons. And it's cut down, it's almost, almost like, 40%, 50% of the world today, 28.1 billion metric tons. So for the county, and again, this represents county operations, and private operations. Okay, so. And so you can see that, oh, that's right, and that is, that's very small. Let's just jump down to the city. So again, we have 133, 1,700,000. Here's what those numbers look like if we're going to stay on target down to 73,293 metric tons, and then finally down to 30,000. So what does it mean for capital? We have to take into account, and this is part of your confidence. Yeah. And so we have to talk about managing growth. So all of the absolute numbers need to come down, also, likely to have more people. So I always like to put it on that per capita. So just looking at 2022, the state had about 7.7 million people. The county has about 129,000, and the city has about a tenth of that, and 12,470. So you can read the annual EMT there, it's in billion, it's odd to think of how many cars and how many people, and how many trips it takes to come up with 58.5 billion miles traveled a year. That was for the state. So you get an average for every person of 7,600, EMT per capita. In the county, that shoots up, because remember, your state lives a lot of people living in a very urban area where they have one car, with other options. So the fact that the county, where it sits and how it operates, is much higher. Over 50% higher than the statewide average, sitting at 11,189 EMT per capita. In the city, for us, our ability to gauge sort of things that we're not out reading the rotometers, we don't have that sort of access to big data. The city falls somewhere right between at 9,261. And that was kind of our job to say, does this make sense? And it absolutely makes sense to us. But we love the feedback that you're not a densely populated urban place. You're going to need more miles per person. And again, this is personal gains, it's not a free. But where people live even further, services and jobs, folks living out there all the time, so many people even more here. So that it fit with the data, it's where it landed, and it absolutely felt right to us. So I mean, put another way, it's another way to put it back, but what we're not offering, making sure also averaging it for the work. Working job in the cars, it's pretty hard, and I know before we left her car, the last year having it, she drove like massive line. That's the big issue with tired. She got to go that many places, and when we come to visit, we took her on long trips, right? So she finally did give the car up. So you think about that, like you're thinking, well, I drive 12, 15 in my car, but kind of put that in the experience of averaging it over children, your elderly parents, that sort of thing. So that So here are the PMT reduction goals, both in the short term and as we go up. So the idea is to decrease the annual per capita vehicle miles traveled by 18% by 2020, and that goal was met statewide. So they approached this legislation and others they set out, and so. Again, that EMT is going down. Then another big reduction goal within the regulation are to increase the annual per capita vehicle miles traveled by 30%. by 2035. That would mean getting about 2,775 miles by personal per person. Pretty big chunk of the world, yeah, 9,011. So now it's starting to really be how we live and still do that. Yeah. And then finally by 2050, the idea is to reduce the vehicle miles traveled by 50%. Because again, we're talking about vehicle miles traveled, not all of them will be in zero emission costs, right? That trade-off. But yeah, now you're thinking, how do you talk to their life with half the moments we have? Right now, some people say, right, I hate that, I hate that service and so far. Others, is realistic, and that's really what we're going to get into.
Yeah, just a question on how the vehicle miles travel reduction works as far as the integration of electric vehicles. Is that considered, is that 0 hours, is it providing on set mileage, so many per capita or transitioning to vehicles?
Great question. Yeah, there are what we call penetration rates in terms of about how these days. So that is part of it. So yes, people are still going to drive, and not everybody's going to drive an EV. So there's also other reasons to look at VMT, and that gets into not having to pay for more roads, which are very expensive to build and maintain. So the combination, if the car converts, yes, as long as the electricity grid is getting cleaner, and we are also sort of rushing to zero versus your gasoline car, but the plan accounts for that penetration rate. So it's not one size fits all. It's going to take both people converting to, we'll bring it. So, yeah, so it's going to take both people converting, but also just generally people having more options to avoid taking every drive.
Okay, I'm Joe. Sorry I'm late. I came on the bus. Does this DMT involve reducing transport use as well?
No, this is all great question. These are all personal products, trucks, light duty, it's the trips that we want to convert to transit, because transit is efficient, and the opportunity to convert transit to lower emitting versions. It's a bigger bang for the buck, right? We get one bus, if it's full and we've avoided 10 car trips, then converting that one bus to an alternative fuel is a lot easier than personal trips. So we're not about reducing transit. We want to encourage transit. We want to encourage walking. We want to encourage biking.
Okay.
And scootering.
Okay, and when you had the discussion, I have a few thoughts on your proposed long-range transit plan. There's some issues. All up for discussion. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, the next, you're right at the goals and all.
I was just wondering, yeah, it should be all is enough to, the vehicle market, producing more fuel efficient vehicles for that, to contribute all of that.
Great question. That standard is set by the federal government, so it is highly dependent on the administration. It's currently sitting at a fleet by 35 miles per hour. Like it's not going anywhere. That's where it currently sits. Yes, that sort of leadership at a national level could absolutely contribute to your state and your community's goals. But it's not going to happen in the next 4 years. And this is similar. There are other states. California is one of them that gets to set its own automobile standards. They apply for a waiver, and again, this comes up dated every 4 years. And that way, basically says they've been fighting smog down there since the 50s, which predates the Clean Air Act of 1969. So they get that. But they can't regulate interstate commerce. So heavy duty trucks, planes, trains, those are all of our vehicles. absolutely, it now is, a leadership. So to the degree that, you know, as older cars just naturally get out of the fleet, absolutely, this does account for those sorts of efficiencies. But a new gas car, have a lot more efficient and less polluting than the one. But this point, the standard is sitting on the 35. Yeah. Okay, we, no, we just.
Data perspective, so I think bottom line, one vehicle mile traveled in production, would that, or, you know, say this one person versus EV, that's not going to reduce by that person's, they now go to zero, right? And that's kind of what I'm getting to, just because that person converts to EV, their miles are still being accounted for road miles as far as this is concerned.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so you got, you know, it's like four-dimensional chess, yes, there's many things going on. Converting a trip, saving a trip, then there's converting to a technology, but converting to a technology that's less polluting, but not zero yet, right? Exactly. So, you know, that's where, you know, the many states are headed, is this idea of more heavily converting to EV, but you have to couple that with, and your state is one that is having this mandate down on. But, you know, it's a long-term contracts and infrastructure that they own and operate for, you know, buy from. And so having a reasonable set of time, you know, to let that grid get newer and further. You know, but they're, you're in sync, Washington in sync with a lot of other states. California is 2025, and Hawaii is 2040. That's, they really have a bigger issue to the benefits, co-benefits through the air quality, because all of their electricity in Hawaii is private, it's dirty field that is shipped in by sheds. They don't come out from gas, right? They don't come out for ways to produce. Everybody else wants wind, and then everybody wants to look at what, and that's a beautiful volcano. So, so Hawaii has a more aggressive to be part of the 40, which always reminds us not that far away in the grand scheme of things. So I have problems in both states for me. I'm going to jump into this. So, you know, one of the goals, again, this new element in the speaking there is very just plainly and bluntly reducing vehicle miles traveled to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals. Again, it's not a one for one, I think everyone's absolutely, you know, reducing a trip is flat out, take it out of the right? We get people to park, we get people to line trips, we get people to walk to school, or, you know, have kids feel safe biking to school, et cetera. That is actually work. That's something that's switching to technology, or, you know, maybe some part of the trip is not drive the transit center, but then catch transit. So there's many ways to all factor into this. So we're talking, you know, the city doesn't control a lot of this. So this is really about how do they partner with other agencies, how to plan for and really promote the idea of, you know, making alternative fuel and alternative modes more attractive. So this policy is to have a city partner with DOT and other agencies, really be supportive of traffic management programs and strategies. So, I mean, I think that's, you know, pretty big picture. And then that's the point is, you know, you've got some years to figure out and coordinate what's going on. There's always a little bit of change there. You know, Washington doesn't want to get out ahead. Maybe they're not really getting more charged and being change makers, and then he says, well, you got to build it. And then people no, I agree with you. And so there's always a little bit of change. And so this one is, you know, intentionally open this way, so that your leader, your leadership can partner with see what it fits right here, but also the way kind of dovetail. What are sort of initiatives at the state level? So the second one here is to create a safe, well-connected, attractive, transportation network to encourage active transportation. This is one the city has often said, right? So this is where other parts of the comprehensive plan will start to, come to play. Understanding growth patterns, managing that, understanding where the barriers to feeling safe and desirable to get out of your car, and to make a trip, especially short trips around town, and how to do that in all sorts of weather. So there's some challenges there. Everything from signage to road diets to, whatever is at the city's, disposal. So again, that policy is, going to participate in that, transformation. So the third one is again working back, with state against the government, against representatives for that, and whatnot, to develop and maintain transit centers, in transportation locations, especially, urban communities experiencing scarcity in transportation alternatives. This is the part that Alex talked about, that sort of one of the four areas of this environmental justice, social justice. So that's what that's really leading to, is to look for those neighborhoods, look for those opportunities where you can serve the underserved. They are always likely to run transit and more transit dependent anyway. Studies we've seen where folks, have this lower federal economic and so a lot of them actually are quite constrained in job mobility, for example. Study that I saw that actually just surprised me because I hadn't thought about it, that people who don't have their own car and have limited availability of transit want to stay in the job, even if they're underpaid, promoted, because looking for another job has to be on this transit line because that is their lifeline. And so understanding if there are such communities in, within your population, within your community, is important and a really good way to improve the quality of life for folks that are transit dependent, but really opening that other exclusion of making it available to everybody. We have a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to dependent guy here. Joe here. I really want to give you some free advice. I think you're kind of on the right track. Without the transit network that's resilient, like, and connects a lot of jobs. It does deny opportunity. It does make folks who live out here in the communities for multiple reasons, whether it's family or income. In my case, both. It's really important to have local routes connected, county connector routes. And one of the issues that I have with your firm's report is that we in Sedro-Woolley are going to lose some of our connections to the 90X that goes from Chuckanut to Mount Vernon to Everett. And as you know, that's a hub for town transit. And I hope we can talk to your firm about that, and I hope we can kind of understand how I came down to tonight, but we can talk a bit about that report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input on that consideration. Moving on to the fourth one here, which is supporting active transportation and other multimodal types of transportation options, both in assessment and mitigation. So again, working with other agencies, but also what can city do to support it. How do transit come? But there are no sidewalks, or not a comfortable place to wait for transit. That is again in all seasons. That would be something that the city could participate and by at this point, not putting ideas out there, really, it's up to the city to charter their own course on this, and so I would left it as. That's the comprehensive plan, it has goals and policies, it's not a prescriptive to do this, right? But there are options about, dedicating parking, if you're really looking for the commuter who leaves town for, a safe place to leave the car, but you feel like you get back to everything, it's dark, it's gonna be lit, and it's gonna be someplace safe, and those are the sorts of amenities that ACU could actually look into. Either again, partnering or encouraging or funding or other things there. But that's why these goals and policies are intentionally open-ended, because this is a big first step. It's gotta start somewhere, but it is not meant to be heavily prescriptive.
I have a question.
Yeah. Get your microphone, sorry.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions here, but there's a couple of things I'd like to ask about some of these policy strategies. First of all, you mentioned several times throughout this presentation, commerce, and commerce wants this, and commerce wants that, right? So one of the things that I would expect to see on a policy decision-making scale like this is to specifically reduce miles traveled, job creation within the city, right? To bring more jobs in, like that. That should be like one of the main focuses of reducing miles traveled. And the other thing is we have transit here. It's not the best, but I do find it to be a lot of the time severely underutilized with a large portion of the residents here. A lot of that could be because we don't have a lot of jobs here within Sedro-Woolley. Everybody has to travel outside of town to work. I'd say over 50% or more. So moving forward on making some of these policy decisions, I'd like to see, partner with commerce to figure out how to get more jobs specifically into our town for our town.
Absolutely. Again, the ways to try, like having to drive 50 miles to a neighboring town is the best savings. There's so much co-benefit of people being more connected to their community by being able to work, live, and play all in the same communities. I'm a believer, it's just a matter of your idea we're capturing all of this. And it really is about, the other benefits that come from that, would be the market. So, figuring out how to get job indicator. Maybe it's, maybe it isn't, maybe there are, hubs and things that are actually, probably, I don't know what it is, I'm like, there are only so many things in the city's toolkit, so yes, making sure that it's aligned with other incentives, there's that word, that could bring more, good paying jobs to the town, all the way down this. Yeah, so we'll take with this and, to tweak if there's another policy to add specific to that. We'll look again at other elements. That's a big part of this. We're talking about this in brand new, we're spending a lot of time on this element, but the fact is it needs to be integrated whole. So absolutely, I think it's always an economics look. So we'll take a look at that to look and see where we can try this together. Thank you very much.
What's the purchase of the meeting?
I mean, did anyone join this one?
So I think that is, so today, so identify gaps in the policies that we have, because like I said, this is new, and we want to make sure that it aligns with the communities that actually wanting or want or going to do moving forward. So if anyone has any ideas, like this is a perfect platform to do that, so that we can incorporate those.
And definitely the policy on 14, the well-connected and attractive bicycle pedestrian network. That Sedro-Woolley has always been a huge talk about with our community, because up until recently, all of some of our major arterials did not have ADA accessible walkways. But we still have a few on, I think, Jason Street, that we still are having some ADA issues, and those ADA barriers also create barriers for bicycles. So there's a lot of that happening, especially in our central area, and I've seen more people, I live on Fairview Township, some of our busiest streets now, and I've seen more people walk in the last year since those, and bicycle, down those roads, than I have in the last 11 years. So just even some of those smaller changes, I want to thank the council and efforts and also commission for making those efforts happen, because they are seen for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna give a comment in the house, respond to that, and that is small things like signage, that this is a bike path, that lane markers, you know, small things make people feel safe. And that's what's gonna get them to very as to, you know, here's the practice. You can't go to a hardware store and buy your shape out your line, right? You know, there's some real practicalities to it. There are trips that if you grocery shopping online, especially if you buy, you know, there are racks in there. Are there lanes that you don't feel the whole time that cars are just honking at you and presenting, you know, just reminding people that bikes have a little right to the road. Through various communities and other communities and neighborhoods that have really struck out. But that's not quite. I think we could talk about if that is, if you were to say, you really might not have the kind of, at least immediately, you know, this sort of biking community, so that we strive for it. So there are small steps. So that's again why this policy is written, you know, very well, not saying go out and purchase this many signs and take this many lanes or, yeah, we started. And these could have a lot more moving in the implementation. As to, you know, how, you know, gas farms, what it's like. We have a comment back.
Yes, thank you. This will be my last comment, because I have to leave in a few minutes, but, you know, you want a BMP strategy for me, I'll give you one. Based on your previous comments, which I really appreciate, number one, I think that Sedro-Woolley should have a plan to have every single bus stop have a bus shelter. I started with our senior center to protect our seniors from the elements. I would start there. These bus shelters help advertise the community, and if Sedro-Woolley runs and manages those shelters, Sedro-Woolley can put advertising out for all kinds of things and get some revenue back into the community to pay for things like bike lanes, to pay for things like making sure that Sedro-Woolley has connections to the 90X and the 80X, because we are a community, we're a good community, there's no getting around it, and we're kind of proud of it. We have low taxes, we have responsible leadership. We have, you know, don't ask my opinion on the schools. I don't have kids. But you know, my point is this, you know, you want to give these strategy, you know, invest in transit and advertise in transit. And, you know, I mean, instead of 0.4 sales tax, you go to 0.6 and make sure that all the routes play well with others, and you have a fair price system in UMO that currently works just fine. Don't worry, I think the transit agency most of this, but you ask for a BOP strategy, and there's one, and here's another one. I want to get one of this one, okay? We are all not just a veteran community, we are a walkable community. You know how I know? Because I have to walk for 2 seniors in my family to go to the library, to go to the little store, to go to the grocery store, to you know, take care of basic ends and needs. And so this community offers things that other communities can only dream about, and that's a safe, walkable community. And I'll stop with that positive thought. Thank you for coming down here.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gary. I work with the RJ group. I appreciate the gentleman's comment about reducing vehicle miles by job creation. that's bringing in these jobs. And so we need to support them in multiple different avenues. One is incentives and how we tax businesses, how we promote the payroll incentives. I know that that's a really hot topic on a state issue right now, but the other is housing. And that's kind of where I'm trying to fill that void with the company that I work for is building workforce housing. And in order for us to do that, we need to have alignment with the city and incentives that allow us to build workforce housing, such as in the 60 to 80% AMI range, because costs are only going up, especially with all of this tariff concerns. Construction costs haven't decreased. We've seen, variables in some scopes of work, but in general, construction costs just continue to rise. And it's really hard for us to build, even no matter how efficient we can build a product, it's really hard for us to build something as cheap as we can, and then be able to sell it to that workforce housing group that can actually afford it. So, that's where we can work with the city through like grants and incentives to help offset that difference so that we can fill that void for the workforce housing group. And I know that one of the bigger employers in Sedro-Woolley, Jamie Kingstreet, mentioned that they're trying to double their headcount in the next 5 years, and their biggest concern is housing. They just don't have enough housing, and there's already a lack of supplies. So to fill that void, we need to have strong alignment with city incentives in order to deal with that hurdle.
Thank you for all of the comments. I would add one more leg to that stool is education training. Be that vocational training, at the local community college, because we want more well-paying jobs, not just service jobs. I know I can see that was kind of implied and inferred there. But yeah, education would be another one that I've seen other communities take on, really collaborating with the school district to, encourage shop back in high school, right? To put those sorts of early steps in training that leads to a light manufacturing job or, fits in the fabric of this community. Agriculture, that is a business, there's science behind that, encouraging that as a avenue of career, and so I would see cities take that. Great. Not getting members, that's a fantastic participation and ideas here. And the common period is done, so it isn't just tonight. Talk about it with your neighbors, over the fence, with your kids out of play day, or at church, the next time you go. Please talk about it. We really do want as broad of a feedback, as broad of a cross section as we can get. So, someone that asked about making the slides available, we do that. We can talk about that in the, and so, be an ambassador, again, whether you love the plan or not, we still need to hear from you regarding this. So thank you for participating. You have more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So talk about how we saw this already.
All right, I just wanted to add something real quick and not to interrupt, but it's part of our comp plan update. We also do have a separate chapter on economic development and of course housing and transportation. So we'll see some more overlap of policies as we go forward. But I just want to remind you that too. These are all really good questions. It's making me realize how much overlap there might be in policies.
So at the beginning of the year, we put out a household travel survey, which was really intended to just provide a baseline of how the community is currently traveling for a variety of different uses. So we started the survey in January, and closed the survey on February 25th. In that time period, we received 128 responses. 8 of those were received on our Spanish version of the survey. Some things to note were that approximately 43% of the responses received were from residents that don't live in city limits. And then also some of the respondents chose not to answer all the questions, which skewed some of our percentages. So the percentages that you'll see tonight are those only of the respondents that replied to that question. So some of these are not going to be surprising to you all of them here. So 90% of households have 2 or more functional vehicles per household. Of those, approximately 13% are electric or hybrid. On average, 33% of households drive more than 80 miles per week. And then over 85% of respondents had at least one person working outside of their household. When traveling for work, the majority of respondents always drive their personal vehicle to work. 90% of respondents never use transit, which we heard earlier that it's underutilized. Approximately 80% of respondents never use bicycles, 75% never use walking and rolling, and never use carpooling when traveling for work. Of the percentage of respondents that travel to school, the majority again uses personal vehicles to travel to school, and then 85% of respondents always use their personal vehicles to run errands. So over 80% of respondents also use their personal vehicles for recreation, travel, or entertainment. The majority of respondents noted that there were no existing barriers to utilizing their personal vehicles, which also probably is not a surprise. The greatest barrier for using transit for most respondents was convenience or ease of use. For bicycles, most of the responses received indicated that incomplete infrastructure, lack of sidewalks, bike paths, shoulders, safe bicycle parking, the things we talked about earlier are the greatest barrier. However, our Spanish-speaking respondents noted that it was not convenient as the largest barrier. Most respondents said that the greatest barrier for walking or rolling was that destinations are too far away. This is consistent with what we heard earlier, and then carpooling has multiple barriers, including convenience, scheduling, coordination, and lack of available partners. So looking at the timeline, we have formed a climate policy advisory team, which we have met with twice at this point to discuss some of the climate-related hazards and the draft strategies to date. We will be meeting with the climate policy advisory team one more time in May to discuss the draft element and the related sub-elements, and then we will be going to the planning commission for the workshop tentatively on May 27th, and then hopefully going to the city council in June. We want to get your feedback. If you didn't feel comfortable today or you think of something later, we really encourage you to send an email. We have it here, but we'll also be posted online. It's the general review development. And then the materials for the planning commission will include the draft element and some elements. Those will be posted ahead of the planning commission meeting, tentatively scheduled for May 27th. I think it's just time for discussion or questions if there are any remaining.
Public meetings. I'm just curious as to where and when these would be posted. I know that I would see that more, so I got that through that involvement, but are there ways that we can how many more meetings are in the public prior to going to the commission, followed by the council, and then B, are there ways that those on the climate team, whatever, that we can help get the word out to those who want to provide feedback, but maybe there's QR codes or links that we can start mass sending to those who reach out to us. Rather than
Just, I think there's one more seat maybe, is that okay?
Yeah, one more.
But yeah, we can certainly look into what's the information on. We do use our website, social media, or the QR code, perhaps, and we've done that before, so otherwise. So yeah, any ideas you have?
Yeah, we want to reach as many people as possible.
I mean, well, that is a general, you know, we still have to get more than 1%. So we fill out the survey and then it's like after work hard. You're like, okay, I'm not at 5%. Again, it's better than 0, you know, but, you know, I've been doing this a long time, you guys, we did skywriting, it was still someone, days ago, I have no idea this video is happening. It's a line of control things that, you know, we can do what all these other suggestions.
Yeah, also, originally, the planning commission will receive a copy of the draft copy of each of the chapters or elements of the comp plan. And make their recommendation to city council, and they'll see it too. Some of these, there will be a two-touch approach. Well, get planning commission's input, send it to council, get council's input, send it back to planning commission. That's about a few of the more complicated ones. And then toward the end, there will be public hearing as well. We got documents, we will finalize this, it's still for, and I'm putting together a schedule, now we talked about that today.
We'll try to post the whole schedule on the
Yeah.
comp plan
In terms of
website. Oh, yeah.
We'll try to post the entire schedule, the tentative schedule, even if it's subject to change on the comp plan webpage, and that way we can have a list of all of the elements that are being sent to planning commission or any public meetings that occur, before adoption. Because I think the intent is the city of Sedro-Woolley is not going to try to adopt within the grant conclusion, which is kind of very technically then June, you have until December, so meetings will be concluded or continuing after the grant. So there will be more times to discuss.
Anyone?
Hi, so I think also another issue we have is the electric infrastructure in this community. So individuals that live just north of city limits, when there's a storm, they can go a week without power, and these are individuals that are on house. So what's the encouragement for them to get the support to have an electric vehicle if they can't even water in their house? I have acreage, I get the electric PSC, I don't know, every few weeks telling me I'm just good of my electric usage. Whatever, do the best I can. But I mean, there's just not been occurred yet, and then there was a lot, I don't have the details, but there was a lot of repairs soon when it was really cold. And so people within city limits didn't have heat for time periods. There's not a push from my personal family to go electric at this point, we drive a lot, and if we're more worried about our well working and our septic system working than the low sulfur gasoline in our vehicles right now.
Yeah.
So thinking long term, like towards 2050, right? I know that there's a lot of people set in place and stuff like that. One of the things that's concerning to me is right now with our state's deficit that we have. And they're one of the solutions is raising property taxes, raising the levy cap on property taxes. That's something that I've talked to many constituents about, something that's, you know, really concerning them as far as affordability and being taxed out of their homes. So what happens when you've seen over the last few years, and you live in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so every time you go to the pump, every couple of years, our fuel taxes just go up and up and up. So how are we gonna maintain our roads, and how is the state gonna get revenue without fuel taxes? What's gonna happen? Because this much I can tell you right now, if you buy an electric car and you pay the tax, it's approximately eight times more expensive than just buying normal tax, because, okay, it's fine. It's substantially more expensive because you're not paying fuel tax to maintain the roads. So is that what we're looking at? Is in the future, now tabs are not 5 times more expensive, but 10 times more expensive, and then our property taxes go up, and then now affordability, which is a massive issue right now, for properties is going to go up. So What's the state's plan with that?
I'm gonna see these things a lot. That's some of a different pace. I hope and figure it out. So I'm not letting you on, those are all very good points. And you know, again, this is where advocacy from local leadership is important, you know, the state government works for you, you know, and so it's hard being one of 750 people to think your voice matters. But really encouraging your message for your city leadership and how they take that to their local representatives. But feel that, you know, you also can participate, but I would just say that's a, you know, place where the city could advocate for certain, you know, policies or whatever. That's my city conservative. That's a big topic right there. But anyway. No, you're good.
So I'm gonna talk about a couple of things. The first one being the transit, and I do know that, you know, the city can build it and they might not. You know, like someone else in the room, I also live just north of Sedro-Woolley. I actually have a special needs son that when we moved there was like, okay, great, we're gonna be away from the people doing meeting miles an hour by our house and tagging our fence and gunshots, because we used to know her. You know, on the hill and, you know, close to a really bad area. And the thing is I actually have fought with Guided Transit for 3 years now, because we moved 3/4 of a mile outside of their gutters. And onto a road that is like 45 mile an hour road that. And it's like really it's just a big fish because of the county road. Now I'm here because I work in Sedro-Woolley and I represent a lot of the lower income people that actually probably don't have access to social media and a website because of maybe low income. So when it comes to the transit, like I really fought with Guided Transit, and I even sat in one of their discussion meetings because at the same point in time, they've cut out probably, my guess is closer to 65% or not 35% of the population of the county, based on what they're doing, because they're going by census data and population centers. They're not counting the people that didn't get counted on the census that live on the outskirts. So to ask them to increase travel into Sedro-Woolley, which for my son, we moved him into an apartment here in Woolley, which is good. But if he takes the bus to Mount Vernon, like a regular transit bus, for a 30-minute appointment, it takes him 6 hours. Because he has to take the bus from Woolley to Burlington, and then wait, and then transfer from Burlington to Mount Vernon, and then wait, and then usually transfer from Mount Vernon to another Mount Vernon. Down his appointment, and then do it all over. And so I think that, you know, counting on transit to be a limiter for that is not probably the best option. It is not convenient. It is not fast. I mean, I would now, and if he goes grocery shopping, he now takes care of transit. We don't have done on that. They limit him to 2 things. So he can't even go like to Walmart and get food and basic necessities on the same trip because they don't allow the extra bags on them. So really, I think, you know, from a Sedro-Woolley standpoint, and I'm really trying to keep it within the city, is, you know, yeah, they can know it, but is the company or the organization that's going to supply that trip actually work with the city to make things easier for them, which is there again, is then now going to increase their mileage on the road and increase their overtime, increase, you know, their drivers, which they're struggling with at times, and everything else. So the second, and that's the transit's huge, and even, I even had a discussion about East County, because they're cutting off an area where, where I work, we serve 125% of the registered population of this town. How is that? Because probably 20% that live there are actually registered on the census. Everybody else did. So that's that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, if you guys need help getting more information, social media is great. Email is great, website's great for the people that have access. If you build a flyer, I'll put it in. Because I work through it. And, we see on average a 1,200 families, they give it to me in 4 languages. Give it to me in English, Spanish, Ukrainian, and Russian, and all of it. It's there. It's actually on that one over there, but yeah, I will put it as much as I can to attempt to get you that feedback from the QR codes, because we do actually have, we do have people that, have resources for like free cell phones and free internet. So at least that's kind of, but they have to know it's out there. And I know for me, I've gone on, I've also, in discussions with the county on theirs at times, and sometimes finding the information is not as easy on the website as everybody makes it out to be for people who are not as capable.
Yeah, that's what we call it. It's very real, both generation, people are more native, with it, and, it's the reality. Input, anybody else? Guys did great, it's very smart. Yes. I just want to make a lot about strategic transits, long range transit plan. So they have their public comment period open until May 14th. So I suggest take a look at that, stay on place comparison between the now and draft, so you can see what's changing. So I encourage everyone to have it on the site and submit comments in the email, we can call. Talk on the phone, it should be very certain.
Also, we have 2 members of the. Also, along with that, we have 2 members of elected officials of the city of Sedro-Woolley of Scattered Transport. So if you want to reach out to any of them, Mary Julie Johnson and Councilman Jill Burns are the Scattered Transport. I think you have to go first.
Yeah, I want to go. Anyway.
Since we're on the topic of PSA, so tomorrow night, City Council meeting, we're gonna have a presentation on consulting on the land use chapter for our comprehensive plan. So that's tomorrow night, it's at 6. That's the consultation of the city hall. That's right at the land use. For those of you who
I might have.
Again, I want to thank all for the really thoughtful discussion tonight, and thanks for being respectful and trying to do this. Going through this topic with us this evening, I know it's a difficult one to go through, so we appreciate you all being here tonight, and please reach out to any of us if you have any questions or feedback. You go on. So thank you. Yeah, thank you.